But on with
Oh,
us,
right.
What's up,
on
guys?
with us right now is John Connolly, the
All
mighty
right.
guitarist of the mighty Sevendust. How are you, man?
What's up,
Doing
John?
good, man. How are you guys?
Doing great, man. Well, first off, happy birthday. We found out that this is your
Yeah,
birthday today.
thanks,
So
man.
thanks for taking some time to come on with us tonight. Talk to us. Really appreciate it. Well, let's obviously get right into it, man. You guys are getting ready to release your new album, Blood and Stone. It comes out in just a couple of days on October 23rd on Rise Records, and this is a damn good record, man. I mean, I love the title track. I think it's a great song. That's the one that really sticks out to me because I really also do like what it represents, which I read is pretty much about the band and what you guys have endured over the years and how you had to go through what you had to go through to get to where you are today, and that you have no plans on stopping anytime soon. And having to endure releasing a new album in the middle of a pandemic is, of course, something that's brand new to everybody right now, right? I mean, regardless of how long you've been together. So, I mean, just talk a bit about, I guess, some of the obstacles you guys had to face with releasing this record. And, I mean, did you guys have this all set up and done before the pandemic happened, or?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part,
Yeah.
we hit the studio. I think it was the beginning of October 2019, and
Okay.
we were finished right around Thanksgiving, and then we mixed early December. So this was all pretty much sort of sitting in the can. The only thing that we really had to kind of work on and tweak was artwork and then a release schedule.
Okay.
And the artwork came kind of quick, and the release schedule got hit. We hit the pause button like I don't know, 30 times.
Oh, wow.
All right, we think we're gonna get a record out now, and then March came around, and it was like, all right, well, wait a minute. All the tours are going away, all the shows are going away.
Mhm.
So it was a weird situation for us to be in because nothing about the pandemic really had an effect on what we actually created as far as the music and the lyrics and all that stuff. The subject matter and the record was finished, but it was just a strange place to be in because it was like, how do you release a record without a tour?
Right.
Yeah,
And
true.
I think we're all learning how to do that this year. I mean,
Mhm.
we're not in any by any stretch of the imagination are we in a unique situation. The whole music business is in
Mhm.
the same spot, so
Yeah.
we're all kind of learning as we go through this. So it was just a lot of communication with Rise and our management, and just kind of looking at data, looking at what other people had done that might have worked, and then just kind of taking a leap of faith because we
Mhm.
really don't know. But it was like, all right, we played our last electric show. I think it was like August, September of 2019. So we're over a year from playing an electric show, which is one of
Wow.
the longest stretches we've ever had. We've
Man.
been a band for over 25 years, and this is the longest time off that we've ever had. So for us, it was like, we got to get this music out, at least get it out, and then just hope for the best. A tour will come when the tour can, when we can figure out a good, safe way to go about doing it.
Sure. Yeah, no doubt. Well, you guys recorded this. I mean, this was produced once again by the great producer you guys have been using on your last two records, Elvis Basquet. Who was also did, like I said, he did All I See as well. What's so special about working with him and that Studio Barbosa that makes really him that go-to guy for you guys? Because I believe you did your solo record was also done by him as well, correct?
We've actually had a relationship with him going back. The first record that I worked on him with was in 2012. We did the first projected record. He mixed it because of his relationship with the Alter Bridge camp. I mean,
Okay.
he'd been working with the Alter Bridge guys for a while, and Scott Phillips, who's in Alter Bridge, is also in projected. So he was like,
Mm.
"Well, Elvis is here local. Why don't we just get him to mix the record?" And it was a great idea because I don't really know how to mix a record yet. I was like, all right, this is sort of our insurance policy, to make sure that I don't completely screw this thing up. Uh,
Mhm.
but we followed up and had an opportunity to work on him with All I See Is War. Clint did his solo record with Elvis, and then we
Mhm.
did this record. And I just finished up in July the third projected record. So
Okay.
we've done quite a bit of work with Elvis, and I think two things kind of stick out. Number one is an obvious for me. He's local. He's
Mhm.
here. He literally lives 10 minutes up the road from us.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
when we're on lockdown in a pandemic, and I'm like, all right, Alter Bridge isn't touring, and Sevendust isn't touring, and Tremonti isn't touring. And Vinny was going to come down and go fishing anyway, so I was like, let's just go make a record.
Nice.
So we gave ourselves about a month to pull all the demos together. He had the opening, and we figured, all right, we're never going to get another opportunity like this again. So let's shoot in there and make a record. So for us, I think or at least for me, the proximity is like it's number one. It's so easy, but not too distant. Second place for him is he's just a phenomenal producer. He's a great engineer. He makes stuff sound good, but he's such a good songwriter. He's such a good singer and guitar player that there's never a shortage of ideas that are going to come out of him. And he's not afraid to tell us, both as a fan of the band and as just friends, for as long as we've been friends, he'll tell us straight up, man, it's not good enough. It needs to be better. Sometimes it's not easy to hear, but
sure,
as an artist, you're like, okay, well, he's looking at the big picture here. He's looking at everything. I'm looking at, I'm very, very focused in on one spot, and he's looking at the whole thing going, it's not worthy of the record.
Yeah.
You can do better, and you're like, all right, well, is he challenging me? Because if he is, it's working, because now I'm like,
it's in your head.
Everything.
Yeah.
He's just one of those guys who gets in there and he gets his hands dirty. He's never going to have a shortage of ideas. And he's one of those guys that I try to explain it to people that, they're like, what's his process? I'm like, every note from every instrument gets its day in court. It goes under the microscope. Every fill, every nuance of every single bit of that record gets hyper focused on. And we have a discussion, we deliberate over, different versions of how to do that particular thing. And then we move on. So it's a cool spot to be in, because nothing gets left. Nothing gets left out. Like everything gets covered, every single piece of that record. And some people might look at it and say, well, maybe you're overanalyzing, but not really, because it's like sometimes, a drum fill, it may not seem like it's significant until you listen back to the song and you go, it's a totally different vibe having that fill be the way that it ended up being. And it's those little things. I think it's all the, it's the sum of the parts. If you can make each individual little piece as special and as unique and as cool as it can be, I think the sum of everything that that you end up with, it's just better, So we have faith in him as a fan and as a producer to be able to tell us, hey man, this sucks. Come on, man, you guys could do better than this, and that's why we love it. It's like there's no sugarcoating. He's not going to tell us what he thinks that we need to hear. He's just going to be honest. He's just going to be like, no, man, this is, and if he tells you something is really good, he believes that too. So I think that's why we kind of keep going back to him. There's no more getting to know you. We understand his process. He understands our process. And it's just a great relationship, But awesome. I can't understate the fact that he can make his own records on his own by himself and have no problem at all. As far as a songwriter and a singer and a guitar player goes, he's one of those dudes who I lean on a lot. It's like, all right, you get it. You get the big picture here.
Yeah. Is that one of the reasons you guys, because I know before All I See Is Warford, I think the previous 3 records, you guys were producing your own, those records. Was it because of him that made you, or is it because of you? Did you feel like you needed someone to tell you like, hey, this sucks or this is great or whatever? Is that why you went back to getting a producer, someone like Elvis?
I think a little bit, I think you kind of go into, when we first started as a band, we really didn't know what kind of a band we were. We didn't know what we were doing. So you kind of go through the motions of trying to figure it out. And then, you work with different producers. You kind of see how stuff goes in the studio. So you get a little bit more comfortable. You get confident. And then you get to the point where you start producing on your own, which we had done back in the first time we did it was 2005. We did Next, Alpha, and then Hope and Sorrow. And it was a cool experiment to do it that way, to be able to have most of the, Sean Grove was, our engineer, producer, and he definitely helped us, steer the ship. But for the most part, we were making a lot of the calls on the demos and how the structure of the song and the lyrical content and stuff like that. I think when we got Clint first back in, we wanted to make sure that we had someone to kind of help us go back through the process again.
Okay.
But then we realized we hadn't really done that whole self-production thing with Clint. So we figured, all right, we're all pretty strong-minded. And we kind of have our opinions and our viewpoints and stuff like that, and we're all very, opinionated especially when it comes to making Sevendust music. So we figured, let's take it into the studio again and see what happens. Blackout the Sun was one of those records where it was like, we literally didn't bring any demos in. It was one of those things where we had a handful, but every day we went in and we created on the spot. So it was like Christmas, because you really didn't know what you were going to get. You may go in there going, okay, today we're going to write, what kind of a song are we going to write? What tuning are we going to be in? Who's going to play the first thing that's going to instigate or start the process of the song? Sometimes it'd be Morgan just playing a drum beat and us going, oh, that's cool, and start, jamming out on it. Or it could be Clint just sitting over there riffing and we'd be like, all right, let's dive into that. But I think it was a cool process for us to actually do it with him, to understand that we can do this. But at the same time, there's also something very special about having that outside perspective, someone who is a fan and someone who, obviously when Elvis produces something, he wants to put a stamp on it, make it as good as possible from a producer's perspective. But it's always cool to have someone who can be in there to give you a little bit of sense of, perspective, objectivity. Sometimes when you're in demo mode, you get so into the demo. I call it demoitis. You can listen to something so many times that you've convinced yourself it's the best thing ever. And then you play it for the rest of your band and they're all going, yeah, it's pretty cool, which means it sucks. And ever again. And then, you're kind of shell shocked because you're like, oh man, I spent all this time on this. But having that guy who can just tell you straight out of the gate, without me listening to it 1,000 times, I'd play something for him and he'd be like, it's pretty cool. It's not great. All right, cool. You playing the next thing. I love this.
Right.
Okay, I never would have thought he would have picked that. So you put a star by that, put it over in this folder. I think he makes the process a little more efficient because he can kind of reel it all in. Sometimes when we're in that mode, Clint will be super, super focused on this. I'm super focused on this. Morgan and LJ are super focused on something else. And I think Elvis can kind of spend time going around, looking at the board going, all right, within about 10 days, he's like, I think I know what the record is.
Right.
Sitting there going, great. Because I have no clue. I'm sitting here looking at 50 songs going, I don't know, man. I mean, all these could be cool, but he can kind of cut to the chase and he can get through it a little bit quicker. So there's an efficiency in the process that I think having an outside producer in that spot definitely helps. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy when we're self-producing because we'll take a perfectly good song and we'll just deconstruct it. We'll get it to the point where it should be left alone. And most producers would be like, stop messing around with it.
Right.
Messing around with it. And all of a sudden it's like, all right, we end up working on something else.
You lose it. Yeah.
You lose it. Yeah. So having someone like that in that spot for us, I think it's just, it's always going to be an advantage to having that six, with 5 of us having strong opinions, having that one guy who can have those opinions as well.
No question. Now, John, this is where I'm going to sound fanboy, and you can tell me I'm full of shit because this is going to sound very fanboy. But listening to this record, which I have about 300 times now, love it. But it's very Seasons or Animosity in vibe. It almost like you guys purposely kind of revisited the most successful albums for direction. Is that accurate, or is it just this is the way you wrote this time?
I think it's just the way that we wrote, but it was funny because someone asked me what it sounded like. Someone was like, does it sound like Kill the Flaw? Does it sound like the first album? Does it sound like Blackout the Sun? And I told him, I said, it almost sounds like it belongs in like 2002, almost 2003, like right in between Animosity and Seasons.
Right.
But it was just because of the music that was there. And it wasn't intentional. It wasn't like we sat down and we said, we're going to make the most melodic record, or we're going to write the most radio-oriented songs, or we're going to make the heaviest record. We just kind of brought songs to the table, and the best demos rose to the top. And it definitely sounded like almost a throwback to somewhere between those two records. I mean, I hear a lot of people saying there's definitely an Animosity element and there's definitely a Seasons element, and it wasn't intentional. It was just, I think those two records in some ways was us we had finally figured out kind of what kind of a band we really were. You know, the first album is always just an experiment to see if we can actually pull it off. And then the second record is that sophomore. You either have the sophomore slump or you go past it. And we survived. So I think when we finally had gotten to Animosity, it was like, all right, take a deep breath. We've gotten over the hump. We can kind of just do whatever we really want to do. And I think Seasons was kind of the next progression with that. Maybe a little bit more melodic because we were working with Butch Walker. So there's always going to be, you know, that type of an element, a little bit more of a pop sensibility going with what we're all about. But we love that. I mean, I'm not going to lie. You know, I'm a huge 21 Pilots fan, Billie Eilish fan. So I don't shy away from any time someone's going to bring that to the table. Elvis does that too. You know, Elvis definitely has a pop sensibility about how he goes about his song structure and his writing. So I think it was just a very unique time and place where it all just kind of happened, and it sounded like a long time ago.
Right.
You know, it definitely wasn't intentional. We didn't sit down and say, all right, we need to write another Seasons or another Animosity. But I think that's kind of the hybrid that we ended up with, something in that vein for sure.
Sure. And you know, as a fan, and again, as a fan, but it seemed to me like from Next through Blackout the Sun was almost like the experimental time. And I know that's a big swath of time, but to me, that always felt like the most experimental time for the band because you guys really tried some different things, not only in recording, but also live shows. I mean, I saw you guys playing with like Emery and bands like that at one point. Very different than, you know, a lot of your career. Do you feel like maybe some of that time was experimental where maybe you're kind of pulling yourself back to what you do the best?
I think so. I think, you know, at 2005 was sort of that, all right, let's just throw it up in the air and see if it's going to stick because, you know, with Clint stepping out, it was a major, you know, it's like talk about the elephant in the room. You know, it was like, all right, can we still sound like Sevendust with a slightly different chemistry? And I think that record for us was just more of a trial by fire. We didn't have a record deal. We were finally away from TVT Records.
Right.
Clint stepped out to do Call Me No One. So, you know, for us, it was like, all right, we're just trying to prove that it's still viable. And we didn't even know. I mean, you know, it took us to get through the demo stage and actually take it into the house. We recorded in a house, which was the first time we ever did that. But when we survived that record and got the deal with Alpha, I remember it was a quick conversation. I think I had like a, you know, maybe a 15, 20-minute phone call with Morgan. And we were just talking about ideas. And I was, you know, he was asking me, he was like, what kind of demos do you have? And I was like, man, everything's heavy. It's like really, really heavy.
Right.
Like, let's just make a real heavy record. Let's not go crazy on the program. And let's just get in there and bang it out. And I went, okay, sweet. You know? So that was kind of the idea and the goal behind that. With Hope and Sorrow, there was no rhyme or reason. It was kind of like anything goes. We wanted to try not to take priority away from choruses, but, you know, just kind of mix it up to the point where, you know, maybe the hook in the song could be the bridge. Maybe the hook in the song could be the verse. Maybe they could all be hooks. Maybe none of them are hooks. So we kind of let go of the steering wheel and just said, well, we're not real sure where this is going to end up. And then on Call Me No One, bringing Clint back, it was sort of like, okay, now that we have the original 5 back, let's sort of get back to business, but let's do something a little bit different from the norm. You know, so I think with that record, we kind of took two slightly, well, I don't know. I mean, it was way different because I think like half of that record is really, really heavy. And then the other half of that record is super, super melodic.
Sure.
Like maybe almost more radio. Like Unraveling is probably about as radio as we've ever chosen to go. But a song like Splinter or a song like Strong Arm Broken could be arguably some of the heaviest stuff that we've ever done too. So, you know, I think even all the way up to Kill the Flaw, you know, Kill the Flaw, we got super technical with some of the stuff. You know, there were some things that we were listening to that we were like, you know what, maybe we can tap into some of this. And, you know, maybe there's an element of that with Sevendust. And then you do Time Travelers and Bonfires, which is all acoustic.
Right.
So like completely stripped down and like different arrangements, you know, same song done a different way and all that stuff. But I think on this one, it was like, I think we sort of gotten the Joneses out of trying this and trying that and finding out what works in Sevendust and what doesn't. And on this record, it was more of a if it fits, great. If it doesn't, that's cool too. But most of the stuff just was super cohesive, even from the beginning. It was like,
Right.
this is one of the few records that we really didn't. There wasn't a lot of like arguments, and like there wasn't a lot of angst during the demo stage. You know, this demo versus this demo. It all just seemed to kind of line up. And then when Elvis started, you know, picking the songs, we all just gave him a thumbs up, and he was like, That's it. We're cool." And I'm like, "Yeah,
Nice.
I love this record." I'm looking at it, thinking about it, getting excited, and I was like, "Yeah, okay." You know, so in
Right.
a lot of ways, I think it just went in. We were super relaxed. I mean, obviously, we wrote a lot, but there was just a different mindset. I think mentally, we were in a slightly different spot, just because we were in a mostly a good place.
Right.
We had just come off a really, really successful tour. We had a good time doing the tour. We had some significant time off to be able to kind of unplug, get with the families, spend some time writing. And then when we hop in the studio, I mean, I'm not going to lie, when you hop in the studio in Butler, New Jersey in February during the middle of a blizzard, you have a different mindset than when you hop in the studio in October in Orlando, Florida, where it's 78 degrees.
Right.
Yeah.
You could just go to Disney World or Epcot, or, you know, cruise around, play golf, you know, so it's like just the mood was a little bit different.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I think we definitely tried to experiment a lot during those middle records and those middle years. And it's not to say that we didn't want to step outside the box. There was quite a bit of experimenting on this record,
Sure.
but it's a little bit more hidden. Like, I think we were a little smarter about hiding the fact that, you know, like some of the songs started on piano.
Okay.
You know, a lot of people are like, "What?" And I even embraced the guys that said, "Just so you know, um, I was in the process of moving, or I thought I was moving, and we had all of our stuff packed up in pods. So all I had here in my studio was my daughter's keyboard." So I was like, you know, let's just see how this goes. See if I can fly a couple of these, throw, you know, a couple guitar parts on there and see what'll end up happening. But yeah, I mean, we stepped outside the box a little bit, but I think at the end of the day, it was all just, you know, what's going to make the most sense melodically for Sevendust.
No
You know?
doubt.
And
Definitely.
once LJ sings on it, puts his stamp on it, that's what makes it Sevendust.
Sure.
Mm.
Now you mentioned LJ, and he's obviously preparing a solo record, and you know, certainly you've all done, you know, things outside of Sevendust, except for him at this point, other than like one song. Now, I'm not trying to start any kind of trouble here. I'm just asking the question. Is that in any way scary for a band when your singer takes that step? And I'll point to like an Aaron Lewis, I'll
Sure.
point to like a Darius Rucker from Hootie and the Blowfish, you know, stepped out, found unbelievably big success away from what they were known from. Do you guys worry about that at all, or do you think there's no way that could happen?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. You know, there's always that thought in the back of your mind. I mean, it's kind of the same way with any. I mean, Morgan's got an EP coming out. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. He's got an EP coming out. It's either going to be later this year or early next year. I mean, we were all kind of looking at the pandemic as being like, okay, this is a curse on one hand, but it's a huge gift on the other hand, because if you wanted time to clear the schedule to actually get some music together, this is the time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, Elvis had done the stuff with Clint. Clint has his solo record. You know, there's always that thought in the back of your mind when any of us do anything, whether it be Projected, the Clint stuff with Morgan. But I think with LJ, it's always a little unique when your singer finally takes that step, because he is the voice and the face of the band.
Right.
I mean, as much as we put our heart and soul into everything that we do outside of Sevendust, we're still, you know, pieces of a bigger picture. And 90% of the time, they're going to be focused on LJ when we do a Sevendust show. You know,
Right.
they'll drift over and watch Morgan and check out what Clint's doing, but then they're back and they're listening to LJ and they're super focused on him. So I think for us, in all honesty, with him doing the solo record, it's always a little scary, you know, to think, oh, what happens if he goes out there and comes, you know, the biggest thing ever? And if that happens, that's awesome. But I think there's more of an excitement around our camp about him actually getting all this together, because it's been a process. He's been working on this for a while, and he's not going to get it out until he's ready. but yeah, I mean, I'm super stoked for him, man. I mean, I can't wait to hear it. You know, I want him to have that thing. I want him to have that other thing out of Sevendust. I think in some ways it's sort of it's a weird spot to be in, because part of me takes that James Hetfield mentality where you want Sevendust to be the only thing that you do.
Sure.
You want to be able to make like that's it. That's where it starts and it stops. But I think as musicians, I think each one of us, we agree when we're in Sevendust on how Sevendust should sound and how those songs should flow and how the album should actually be put together. But each one of us has very unique visions on where we see other types of music, you know, and that's why we kind of take these outlets to be able to do these other things. But yeah, for LJ, man, I'm just thrilled about the fact that it's actually coming together, and at some point he's actually going to get this out. Cool. And hey, man, if we end up, you know, getting pitched to the curb because he's the next, you know, they're like, hey, man, I'll be calling up, going, can I get some tickets or something, man? Can I get some backstage
Nice. Awesome. Well, hey, John, I know you got to go here real quickly. I just had to ask you one thing while you're on.
Sure.
I'm going to take you down a trip down memory lane. I've got to bring up a band that you were in back in the early 90s. It was a record. I had this record too, Peace Dogs.
Oh, wow.
X's for Eyes, man.
Yeah.
I remember I loved that. I mean, the song Death Chant, I still love that song. I mean, that was a really cool record. I was interesting. You know, it was that Energy Records label that was out back then in the early 90s, right? Yeah.
Was on there, which was Rap Child America. Propane was on there.
Yeah, Propane and MOD and yeah, all those. It was a cool little label. And so talk a bit about that first experience in the music industry that you had with Energy. I mean, what did it prepare you for, if anything, really? Because it was it was interesting time. And obviously when you got Sevendust, when you guys got signed by TVT, that was probably about 4 or 5 years later. What did you pick up from that first experience, if anything at all, from Energy?
I mean, how to exist in the van tour with Propane is
the
thing that I probably remember the most. I mean, we literally had 2 bands and crew in 1 van. And, you know, just being able to survive that, you really get to appreciate a bus. Having a coffee maker and a bathroom where you can, you know, actually just take a leak or whatever. But the whole process with the Peace Dog things was, it was an awesome experience because it was our first rip at it, you know, first time in a real studio, first time working with a real producer. It was Alex Perry-Ellis who produced that. You know, just being around that environment was just kind of like, you know, I mean, sometimes you're pinching yourself going, is this really happening? You know, because it was like everyone wants to get signed, but I don't think you realize that it actually happened until way after the fact. You know, you're sort of out on tour and you're looking around going, wait a minute. Is this real life? Like, did this actually happen? Like, hang on a second. We're on tour. We're actually going. You know, we're going to be playing a show, you know, in a few hours to, you know, people we've never played before in a state we've never played before. So, I mean, that Peace Dogs experience for me was super valuable just because it was a first crack at it. And that record was a cool record. It was like, it was one of those records that it just didn't fit in anywhere. It was like, it was somewhere stuck between, you know, Jane's Addiction and, you know, the Cult and sort of a Metallica kind of a thing, but not really, because it was, you know, people had a real hard time figuring out what kind of a band we were.
What was that in the early 90s? You know, the grunge, it was big and metal. So it was sort of, it was a very interesting time. Yeah.
We were like, I mean, we were related to grunge, but we weren't like full on grunge.
No. Yeah.
We were still kind of loosely somewhere else. So, I mean, for us, I think we all, you know, it was definitely an experience that was a great learning experience, because by the time we hit the studio with Sevendust, other than the fact that I was on a completely different instrument,
that's true.
Completely different to talk about. But other than that, it was like, all right, we'd already been in the studio experience. There's always that weirdness the first time you go in there. You know, the first time you go in, you're like, all right, we're recording. This is actually going down like history forever. Wait a minute, hang on. I didn't do it good enough. Let's do it again. So yeah, doing that whole Peace Dogs record was a good rip at it. And I mean, it taught me personally a lot about the business that I just didn't understand. You know, a lot of people think you just get signed, you go out on tour, your manager handles everything, and then that's the end of it. But I think going through that process, you know, learning a good bit about the business side of it. It has nothing to do with the art. You know, the art's one thing, the lyrics are one thing, the melodies are another thing, and then how you actually operate as a business is a completely different thing, because you almost have to take all that art and say, okay, now it's a product. Now we have to figure out how to sell it. So watching how actually that worked and came together, it definitely helped going into the Sevendust stuff, because let's call a spade a spade. I mean, back from 92 to now, the business has changed. I mean, it's never stopped changing. You know, I mean, we came from a time when we were passing out cassettes. Vinyl, you couldn't find vinyl. Nobody wanted vinyl. It was all about cassettes and then CDs. And then all of a sudden, you know, everyone wants to stream and they want vinyl again. So I'm like, wait a second, it's 30 years later. Vinyl the thing. Like, what's going on here? This is kind of cool. You know, I go into my daughter's room and she's got all the vinyl that I had when I was in high school. She's got bands. She's listening to Soundgarden and Nirvana. And I'm like, what is happening? You know, my mom's looking at me going, this has come full circle. And I'm like, yeah, it has. It's crazy.
So what you're saying is the next Sevendust release will be on 8-track.
I guess so.
Yeah, right.
Might as well, right?
Awesome. Well, hey, John, go ahead and enjoy your birthday, man. Thanks so much for coming on. Really do appreciate it. And yeah, we look forward to, you know, the record coming out in 2 days, October 23rd, Blood and Stone. Everyone should pick up a copy. And once again, thanks a lot for talking to us. Appreciate it.
You guys, man. Y'all have a good
All right.
Take
You
care.
too. Take care, John.
Sounds good. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Aftershocks. For more episodes, go to our website at www.aftershockspodcast.com. Visit us on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages for more news and information on the podcast. And be sure to subscribe, listen to, and review all episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all other podcast platforms. For your music listening pleasure, visit our website or go to www.shockwavesradio.com. For all comments and questions, please email us at info@aftershockspodcast.com.